I still remember that day. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds, and the cold wind whispered through the trees outside the house. Emma sat in the living room staring at the old clock on the wall. Its ticking felt louder than usual, like it was echoing through her chest. She had always loved the house she shared with her husband, Daniel. But now, after his sudden death, every corner felt different, strange, and almost threatening. The laughter, the warmth, the safety all gone. She remembered how just a week ago Daniel had seemed normal. They had shared their usual morning coffee, talked about the garden, and laughed at some silly story he had heard on the radio. But beneath his calm voice, Emma now remembered a shadow in his eyes, a hint of something he had kept from her. She had asked him once about the locked room in the house, the one he always forbade her from entering. His face had hardened, and he had said, "It's nothing you should worry about." Emma had felt a strange chill then, but she had tried to brush it off. She trusted him. She loved him. Now, with him gone, the house felt emptier than ever. Every creak of the wooden floor sounded like a whisper. Every gust of wind rattling the windows felt like a warning. Emma wandered from room to room, touching the familiar furniture, trying to find comfort in the memories. But the thought of the locked room gnawed at her. What could be so secret, so important, that Daniel had never allowed her to see it? Days passed in silence. Friends and neighbors came to offer condolences, but Emma felt detached from them, as if she were watching life from a distance. She kept thinking about that room. Every time she passed the old hallway, she caught herself staring at the door at the end. It was solid wood, dark brown, with a brass handle that gleamed even in the dim light. She had never dared touch it before, but now, with Daniel gone, the temptation was too strong. One rainy afternoon, Emma finally decided to act. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The house was silent except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. She stood before the door, hand trembling slightly as she reached for the handle. She paused. Her mind was flooded with questions. Should she do this? What if she found something she couldn't handle? But the curiosity, the need to know the truth, was overwhelming. She turned the handle. The door resisted at first, as if it had been waiting for her for years. Then, with a quiet click, it opened. A faint smell of dust and old wood filled her nose. The room beyond was dimly lit, with only a small window letting in a weak gray light. Emma stepped inside, her footsteps careful, echoing softly. The room was larger than she had imagined. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old books, boxes, and mysterious objects she didn't recognize. Her eyes fell on a small table in the center of the room. On it lay a leather-bound journal. Emma's hands shook as she picked it up. The leather was worn, the pages yellowed with age. She opened it carefully. Daniel's handwriting filled the pages, neat and precise. Her breath caught in her throat. This was his private world, the part of him he had never shared. And now it was hers to discover. The first entries were about ordinary things, thoughts about work, garden plans, memories from their early days together. But as she read on, the tone changed. The entries became darker, more secretive. Daniel wrote about experiments, hidden meetings, things that sounded impossible. Emma's mind raced. What had her husband been hiding? Why had he been so careful to keep her away? Then she noticed something in the corner of the room, a small chest, locked with a heavy padlock. Her heart skipped a beat. The chest seemed out of place, almost alive with mystery. She knelt down and examined it. There were scratches on the lock, as if someone had tried to open it before. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. What could be inside? Money? Secrets? Or something else, something she could never imagine. The rain outside intensified, tapping against the window like nervous fingers. Emma's mind was spinning. She could feel Daniel's presence in the room, as if he were watching her, warning her, or maybe guiding her. She wanted to stop, to leave, to pretend she had never seen the room. But she couldn't. Something deep inside her demanded the truth. And she couldn't turn back. She took a step closer to the chest, her fingers brushing the cold metal of the padlock. Then, suddenly, she heard a sound. A soft creak, like a door opening somewhere else in the house. Emma froze. Her heart pounded louder than ever. She wasn't alone. The house was supposed to be empty. She held her breath, listening. The sound came again, closer this time. A whisper, almost inaudible, seemed to float through the air. Emma's hands trembled. I must be imagining it, she whispered to herself. But the feeling of being watched was too strong. She looked around the room, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The shelves, the boxes, the old furniture, they all seemed to hide secrets of their own. Emma felt a wave of fear, sharp and sudden, yet mixed with an irresistible curiosity. She decided to ignore the sound for a moment and focused on the chest. Maybe it held the answers. But the key? Where was the key? She remembered Daniel keeping keys in a small drawer in his study. Maybe there was a spare here, in this room. She began searching frantically, moving boxes, opening drawers, checking shelves. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The whispers grew louder, or maybe it was her imagination, finally. Under a pile of old papers, she found Etta's small brass key. It felt warm in her hand, like it had been waiting for her. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She looked at the chest, then at the key. Could it really be this simple? Or was this another layer of the secret Daniel had kept so carefully? Her hand shook as she inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. Emma hesitated for a moment, then slowly lifted the lid. The chest creaked open, and inside. She froze. What she saw made her heart stop. It wasn't what she expected. It wasn't just papers or old belongings. There was something else, something that made her gasp in shock. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. She wanted to step back, to close the chest, to pretend she had never opened it. But curiosity held her in place. She had to see. She had to know. And then, as she leaned closer, she heard the whisper again, clearer this time. Not from the house, not from the shadows, but from inside her own mind. Don't open it. Not yet. Emma's hands froze over the chest. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The whisper faded, but the feeling of being watched didn't. She could sense eyes on her, even though the room was empty. Her mind raced with questions. Who or what was warning her? What had Daniel hidden so carefully that even after his death it seemed to protect itself? Her heartbeat thundered in her chest as she looked down at the chest. The rain continued to pour outside, a steady drum against the windows. The shadows in the corners seemed to move, flicker, as if alive. Emma's hands shook, but she couldn't stop now. She had come too far. The truth was so close, and then a loud thud echoed from upstairs. Something heavy had fallen. Emma jumped, her heart in her throat. She wasn't alone. Someone or something was in the house with her. The room grew colder, the shadows longer. Emma realized she might be in danger. But even fear couldn't stop her now. She had to know what Daniel had been hiding all these years. She had to uncover the secret of the room he had forbidden her to enter. Her eyes returned to the chest. She took a deep breath, gripping the edge of it. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. That's when she saw it. A small handwritten note lying at the bottom of the chest. It was Daniel's handwriting. But the words made her blood run cold. If you are reading this, it's already too late. Emma's hands shook violently. She wanted to scream, to drop everything and run, but something inside her compelled her to read further. And as she unfolded the note, a cold wind blew through the room, rattling the windows. And the lights flickered. Emma realized she had crossed a line. There was no turning back now, and at that very moment, a shadow moved in the corner of the room. Something large, something alive. Emma's heart stopped. She wasn't alone. I still remember that night. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside damp and quiet. Yet inside the house, the air felt heavy, thick with tension. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the shadow in the corner of the room. Her heart raced like a drum. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She wanted to call out, to scream, to demand an explanation, but her voice caught in her throat. The shadow didn't move like a human. It shifted, almost like it had a life of its own, creeping along the walls and flickering with the faint light that came through the dusty window. Emma's mind raced. "This can't be real," she whispered to herself. But every sense in her body screamed otherwise. The room, the chest, the note. They all felt alive, as if the secrets Daniel had kept so carefully were now awake and watching her. She could feel a chill crawling up her spine. The walls seemed to close in slightly, the shelves looming taller. And the small window that had once seemed comforting now looked like a tiny slit into a dark, unknown world. Her eyes returned to the chest. The note in Daniel's handwriting lay in front of her, warning her. But Emma could not resist. She had to know more. She unfolded it slowly, trying to steady her shaking hands. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were clear. "If you are reading this, it's already too late. Some truths are better left buried. I tried to protect you. I tried to hide it. But the house remembers. The room remembers. You will see soon, and you will have to decide." Emma swallowed hard. Her throat was dry, and a wave of fear swept over her. She had loved Daniel with all her heart. She had trusted him, and now she realized that the man she thought she knew had been living with a secret so powerful, so dangerous that even after his death it reached out to her. She tried to calm herself. Maybe it was just the grief, the loneliness, the long nights alone in the house. Maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. But the shadow in the corner told her otherwise. She had to understand what Daniel had hidden. She had to see it for herself. Carefully, Emma set the note aside and returned her attention to the chest. The top shelf of the chest contained old photographs, letters, and small trinkets. But at the bottom, beneath a folded velvet cloth, she found something else, something that made her gasp. A small, intricately carved box, locked with a tiny clasp. The craftsmanship was exquisite, almost delicate, yet it radiated a strange sense of danger. Emma's hands hovered over the box. She didn't know why, but she felt drawn to it, almost as if Daniel himself were urging her to see it. She unclasped it carefully. Inside there was a collection of objects she didn't understand, a few keys, some odd-shaped coins, and a small folded piece of paper. She picked up the paper. It was a map. The map was old and faded, the lines almost invisible. But as she studied it, her heart pounded. It was a map of the house. But not just the house. It showed hidden passages, secret doors, and areas she had never seen before. Her hands shook. How could Daniel have hidden all this? What had been going on under her nose all these years? A sudden sound made her jump a low creak from the floorboards above. It was slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing. Emma froze. The house was supposed to be empty. No one else was supposed to be here. Her mind immediately imagined intruders, burglars, strangers in the night. But then, as her eyes darted around the room, she realized something terrifying. The creak didn't come from outside, it came from the room itself. From the walls, from the shadows, the map in her hand seemed to pulse, almost glowing in the dim light. Emma could feel a strange energy emanating from it. She had never believed in anything supernatural. Never in her life. But the evidence was in front of her. Daniel had been protecting something. Something alive. Something dangerous. Something she wasn't ready for. Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She looked around the room again. The shelves, the boxes, the furniture all seemed ordinary, yet her intuition screamed otherwise. There was something hidden in plain sight, something Daniel had kept from her. Something that now wanted her to find it. She unfolded the map completely. There was a small X marked at the back of the house in the basement area. She traced the lines with her finger, heart pounding. Could it really be that there was a secret passage in the basement? And if so, what awaited her there? Emma shivered. She had always thought of the basement as a simple storage space, dark and dusty. But now it seemed like a gateway to Daniel's hidden life. The whisper came again. Soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. "Don't go." Not yet. Emma froze, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew the voice was not real yet. It felt real. It felt like Daniel himself, warning her, guiding her, trying to protect her. She took a deep breath and shook her head. No, she couldn't turn back now. She had come too far. Emma carefully picked up the map and the small box, then scanned the room once more. The shadow in the corner had not moved, but she could feel its gaze. The house was alive in ways she could not understand. She had to act quickly. She crept toward the door, moving slowly, trying not to make a sound. As she stepped into the hallway, she noticed something she hadn't before. Faint scratch mark along the wall, leading down toward the basement stairs. Her pulse quickened. It was a sign, a trail, a clue left by Daniel. He had known she would come. He had known she would try to uncover the secret. Emma followed the marks carefully, her eyes darting to every shadow. The stairs to the basement loomed ahead, dark and narrow. A cold draft brushed her face as she peered down into the darkness. The basement smelled of damp wood and old stone. But there was something else, a faint metallic scent, almost like blood, but not quite. Her stomach churned. She took the first step down. The stairs creaked under her weight. Her hand pressed against the cold wall for support. With each step, her fear grew, but so did her determination. She had to know. She had to see the truth. Halfway down, the whisper returned. Clearer this time. You shouldn't be here. Emma froze. Her breath came in short gasps. The small box in her hands felt heavier now, as if it contained not just objects, but a burden she could barely comprehend. She took another step, then another. At the bottom of the stairs, the basement stretched out before her. Faint light from a small window barely illuminated the space, but Emma could make out shapes, shelves, boxes, and at the far end, a door she had never noticed before. Her pulse quickened. The map had led her here. This door, she realized, must be the final piece of Daniel's secret. Everything he had hidden, everything he had protected, was behind that door. She took a deep breath, gripping the small box tightly, and stepped forward. As she reached the door, she noticed something carved into the wood, a symbol she didn't recognize. It looked old, ancient, almost like a warning. Her fingers traced the symbol, and a shiver ran down her spine. The door was locked. No handle, no keyhole. Just the heavy wood standing between her and the secret Daniel had kept all these years. Emma's mind raced. Could this small box contain the key? Or perhaps it was a puzzle, something Daniel had left for her to solve. She opened the box carefully and examined its contents again. The keys, the coins, the folded paper. It all seemed ordinary, yet she could feel their importance. Her heart pounded. She had to figure it out. Suddenly, a noise behind her made her jump. Something moved in the shadows of the basement, a soft scuff, like footsteps, but no one was supposed to be here. Emma spun around, but the basement was empty. Only the shadows danced along the walls, flickering with the faint light. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Fear, curiosity, and determination warred inside her. She had come too far to turn back now. She had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Emma lifted the folded paper from the box. It was a set of instructions, carefully written, precise. She realized it was a guide, a path to unlock the door. Her hands shook as she followed the steps. The air in the basement grew colder, the shadows longer. She could feel a presence unseen, watching her every move. As she completed the final step, the door creaked slightly. A faint crack appeared along its edge. Emma's heart leaped. She had done it. She had unlocked the first layer of Daniel's secret. But as the door began to move, slowly swinging open, a cold wind burst from inside, extinguishing the small light in her hand. The basement was plunged into darkness. Emma could hear something moving inside, something heavy, deliberate, alive. Her heart raced. She knew in that instant that what lay beyond the door was not just a secret. It was a truth Daniel had tried to hide, a truth that might change everything she thought she knew about him, and about her life. Emma stepped closer, hand trembling, ready to enter. But the moment she touched the door, she heard a voice, clear, strong, and terrifying. You shouldn't have come here. Emma froze. paralyzed with fear. The shadows around her seemed to close in, and the darkness of the door swallowed the room. Her heart pounded in her chest. She realized she might not be prepared for what waited on the other side. And then the door began to open wider on its own. I still remember that night. The darkness in the basement pressed against Emma like a living thing, heavy and suffocating. The door she had just unlocked groaned as it swung wider, revealing a space she could not yet fully see. The cold air that escaped from the opening made her shiver, creeping under her clothes and chilling her bones. She gripped the small box tightly, its weight suddenly heavier, as if it carried more than just keys, and coins it carried the responsibility of the unknown. Emma's heart raced. She had faced fear before in small ways. Stormy nights, power outages, even a few small intruders years ago. But this felt alive. The shadows moved differently here. They weren't just dark corners. They seemed to watch, to wait. The faint glow of the basement window barely illuminated the space beyond the door. Emma could see walls lined with shelves, and at first glance it looked like another storage room. But the air felt different, charged, almost humming with something she could not name. The map in her hand, now fully unfolded, showed that the room was larger than she could see. There were symbols and markings she didn't understand. But one thing was clear. This was the heart of Daniel's secret. Her mind raced with possibilities. What could he have hidden here that was so important, so dangerous, that even after death it seemed to guard itself? She stepped forward slowly, her feet careful on the cold stone floor. The shadows seemed to shift as she moved, and the faint metallic scent that had been in the basement grew stronger. Emma's pulse hammered in her ears. She could feel her own breath, uneven and quick, mixing with the damp, musty air. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to turn back, but curiosity and a strange sense of duty kept her moving. Daniel had trusted her with this secret in a way only now becoming clear as she walked further into the room. Her eyes began to adjust to the dim light. On the far wall, she noticed a small table similar to the one in the secret room upstairs. But this one was different. It was covered with papers, old photographs, and objects she couldn't identify. In the center lay a single folder tied carefully with a red ribbon. Her hands shook as she approached it. Every step felt like she was crossing a boundary, entering a place where the world she knew no longer existed. Emma knelt in front of the table and untied the ribbon. The folder contained documents, photographs, and letters, all neatly arranged, but filled with secrets she could not yet understand. Some of the papers were written in Daniel's handwriting, others printed or typed. Emma picked up the first sheet, her eyes scanning the words. They spoke of experiments, plans, and locations she had never heard of. Her mind struggled to comprehend. What had Daniel been doing all these years behind her back? Her eyes fell on a photograph. It showed Daniel, much younger, standing beside a man she didn't recognize. The man's face was stern, almost cold, and his eyes seemed to look directly at her through the photo. Behind them in the background was a building she had never seen, a place that looked secret, hidden, almost forbidden. Emma's heart raced. What connection did this man have to Daniel? And why had Daniel never spoken of him? A sudden noise startled her. A soft creak from behind the shelves made her jump. She turned quickly, but the space was empty. The shadows stretched and flickered, and for a moment she thought she saw movement in the darkness. Her mind screamed that she was imagining it. But then a whisper, faint and almost human, brushed against her ear. "You shouldn't be here. Leave." Emma froze. Her hands gripped the folder tighter. Her first instinct was to run, to leave the basement and forget this ever happened. But she couldn't. Something deep inside told her that Daniel's secret wasn't just about Hemet, was about her too. She had to know the truth. She had to understand what he had been protecting. Turning back to the table, she noticed a small key taped to the inside of the folder. It was delicate, unlike the heavy keys in the box. Her fingers shook as she picked it up. Something about it felt alive, almost pulsing. Emma's breath caught. Could this key unlock something deeper? Something Daniel had hidden even from her? The shadows seemed to thicken as she moved toward the far corner of the room. There, half hidden behind an old bookshelf, was a small door almost invisible in the darkness. The key in her hand felt like it belonged there. She knelt down, examining the lock. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the sound echoed through the entire house. Slowly, trembling, she inserted the key. It turned with a click. The door swung open slightly, revealing darkness so complete that she could see nothing inside. A wave of cold wind brushed past her, carrying with it the faint smell of earth and something else, something faintly metallic, almost like blood. Emma swallowed hard. She knew that whatever lay beyond this door was the deepest secret Daniel had ever kept. She could feel it in her bones. Stepping closer, she could see faint outlines in the darkness, shelves, objects, and something else. Something that made her stomach tighten. She couldn't identify it at first, but then she noticed movement. A shadow shifting, slow and deliberate, almost like a living creature. Her heart hammered. She realized with a sinking feeling that this was not just a room, it was alive. Emma took a deep breath and stepped inside, the door creaking softly behind her. The air was colder here, the shadows thicker, and the silence more profound. Her senses were on high alert. Every creak, every whisper of wind, every faint rustle made her flinch. She could feel her pulse in her ears. The box in her hands seemed to vibrate slightly, as if responding to the room itself. Her eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness. She could make out shapes, shelves lined with jars, small boxes, and papers, all meticulously organized. But at the far end of the room, partially hidden by shadows, was something that froze her blood. A figure, or maybe a shape covered with a heavy cloth. It was large, too large to be a normal object. And it radiated a presence that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Emma's fingers shook as she stepped closer. She wanted to uncover it to see what Daniel had hidden all these years. But fear clawed at her chest. Something told her that once she saw it, there would be no turning back. She hesitated, hand hovering over the cloth. Then she heard it, a faint whisper. Unmistakable, but not from the room. Emma, you must leave. It's too dangerous. Her breath caught in her throat. She froze. The whisper had a tone of urgency, warning, almost like Daniel himself. Her hand trembled, but the pull of curiosity and the need to know the truth was stronger. Slowly, she reached forward. The moment her fingers touched the cloth, the shadows in the room seemed to shift violently, swirling around her. The air grew heavier, almost suffocating. A cold wind blew from nowhere, extinguishing the faint light from the basement window. Emma could barely see, but she felt the presence behind the cloth move. It was alive. Something breathed. Something watched. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the sound echoed through the walls. She took a deep breath, summoning courage she didn't know she had. With trembling hands, she pulled the cloth away. And what she saw made her gasp. It was not what she expected. Not at all. It was bigger than life, older than the house itself, and radiating a strange, almost terrifying energy. Emma felt her knees weaken. She wanted to step back, to close the door, to forget everything. But something inside her told her that she had to face it. That this was Daniel's secret for a reason, and somehow it was connected to her. The shadows shifted again, and a faint, low hum filled the room, vibrating through the stone floor and into her chest. Emma realized she was not alone. Whatever this was, it was aware of her, and now it was waiting. A sudden thud echoed from the far wall, followed by another, and then a whisper, urgent and terrified. Emma, turn back now. Emma froze. She realized that the secret Daniel had kept from her all these years was alive, watching her and perhaps judging her. And then, without warning, the hum grew louder and the figure in the shadows began to move. I still remember that night. The basement felt alive, almost breathing. Emma's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. The figure in the shadows had moved, though she still could not make out its shape clearly. The air was thick, heavy and cold, making it difficult for her to breathe. Every instinct in her body screamed to run, to leave the house, to escape the secret Daniel had hidden all these years. But something deeper inside her kept her rooted to the spot, something she couldn't name, but knew she had to face. The hum that had filled the room moments ago grew louder, vibrating through the stone floor and up into her chest. Emma could feel it in her bones, a strange energy that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Her hands shook as she clutched the small box and the folded map, feeling the weight of Daniel's legacy pressing down on her. She had never seen anything like this before, and fear mingled with a strange sense of awe. Slowly, the figure stepped forward, or perhaps it moved on its own. Emma's eyes widened as she tried to focus in the dim light. It was humanoid in shape, but its movements were unnatural, almost fluid, like it could change form at will. Shadows clung to it, swirling and flickering as it glided across the floor. Emma wanted to scream, but her voice refused to come. Her body was frozen, caught between fear and curiosity. A sudden thought struck her. Daniel had kept this hidden for a reason. This presence, whatever it was, might be dangerous, or perhaps it was protecting something. Emma's mind raced. Could Daniel have been trying to protect her? Or had he been hiding this from the world because it was too dangerous to exist openly? She took a careful step forward, trying to keep her eyes on the figure. It didn't attack. It didn't speak. It just observed her, moving with a slow, deliberate grace, as if studying her very being. Emma's hands trembled as she placed the small box on the floor, thinking maybe she could offer it, somehow bridge a connection. The object had guided her this far, it might help now. Then, without warning, the figure paused and tilted its head, and Emma felt something strange, a flicker of recognition. She realized it wasn't just a shadow or a creature. It had intelligence, awareness. It was alive in a way she couldn't explain. Her heart pounded, and she could feel the sweat running down her back. The basement felt colder now, the shadows deeper, almost consuming her. Emma remembered the note she had found in the chest upstairs. Some truths are better left buried. Her mind screamed at her to stop, but the presence seemed to be guiding her deeper into the room. A small doorway, hidden behind stacks of boxes and shelves, now became visible in the faint light. She hadn't noticed it before. Her pulse quickened. Could this be the heart of Daniel's secret? The place he had guarded so fiercely? Summoning every ounce of courage, she moved toward the hidden doorway. The shadows shifted again, and the figure glided ahead as if leading her. Her hands shook as she reached for the handle, a cold metal that seemed to hum beneath her fingers. She pushed it open slowly. The room beyond was darker than the basement, almost black, yet a faint glow emanated from the far corner. Emma squinted, trying to make sense of what she saw. In the corner there was a pedestal, simple yet imposing. On it rested a small, glowing object-hand orb, emitting a soft light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Emma's eyes widened in shock. She had never seen anything like it. The glow illuminated the room just enough to reveal intricate symbols carved into the walls. Strange runes that seemed to move subtly in the light. She felt a shiver crawl up her spine. This was ancient, powerful, and beyond anything she could understand. The presence shifted behind her. Closer now. Emma could feel its warmth, or was it heat? Against her back. She turned slightly, and though she couldn't see its face, she felt its gaze, studying her, waiting for her reaction. Her hands trembled, and she whispered almost to herself, "Daniel, what is this?" The orb pulsed brighter, and a warmth spread through her hands as if it were responding to her presence. Her fear mingled with wonder. She realized this was what Daniel had been protecting, what he had kept hidden from her and the world. But why, and why now, after his death, had it chosen to reveal itself to her? Emma's mind raced with questions, but one thing became clear. This was not just a secret. It was alive, powerful, and potentially dangerous. She had to understand it. She had to uncover the truth. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out to touch the orb. The moment her fingers made contact, a shock ran through her body, cold and tingling, yet not painful. Images flashed in her mind, visions of Daniel, strange places, symbols, and people she did not recognize. Secrets that had been buried for years were suddenly unfolding before her eyes. The whispers returned louder this time, surrounding her. "Do you understand what you have found? Do you know what comes next?" Emma gasped, pulling her hand back. The orb's light dimmed slightly, but the visions continued, now more chaotic. She saw Daniel in a room like this one, studying the orb, writing notes, and consulting with someone, perhaps the same man in the photograph she had found. She saw strange machines, experiments, and shadows moving in ways that defied explanation. Her head spun. She couldn't make sense of it, yet she knew she had to keep looking. Suddenly, the presence behind her shifted sharply. A low, vibrating hum filled the room, louder than before. Emma turned slowly, heart hammering. The figure had moved closer, and she realized with a jolt of fear that it was not entirely corporeal. Parts of it seemed to shimmer, fade, and reform, like it was made of shadows and light at the same time. She felt the hairs on her arms stand on end. The whispers grew urgent. "You must leave before it awakens fully." Emma's chest tightened. She understood now that this orb, this presence, was tied to something far bigger than herself or Daniel. Something ancient, something dangerous. She wanted to run, to escape, but her feet refused to move. Something inside her demanded she stay, demanded she'll understand, demanded she'll face the truth. Her eyes returned to the orb. It pulsed once, brightly, and she felt a rush of energy flow through her, almost like it was calling her. Emma realized she was connected to it somehow. The small box in her hand vibrated slightly, responding to the orb. The map, the keys, the notes, they were all pieces of a puzzle, leading her to this moment. And then, a sound broke the silence. A loud crack, like wood snapping, echoed from the far wall. The shadows twisted violently, and the figure lunged forward faster than Emma could react. Her heart froze. She could feel its energy pressing against her, overwhelming, almost crushing. The orb's light flared, illuminating the room in blinding brilliance. Emma screamed, stumbling back. The figure collided with the pedestal, and the orb rolled across the floor, casting strange patterns of light and shadow on the walls. The room shook slightly, and she could hear a low, rumbling growl, vibrating through the floor, through her body. Through the house itself, she realized, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, that Daniel had not only hidden a secret, he had contained something. Something alive, dangerous, and beyond comprehension. And now, with her presence, it was awakening Emma back toward the doorway, her mind racing. She had come to uncover the truth, but the truth was more than she could handle. She could feel the air vibrating with energy, the shadows twisting around her, and the orb pulsing like a heartbeat out of control. Then, in a whisper, both terrifying and urgent, the voice returned. "Emma, you should never have come here." Her eyes widened as the figure stepped fully into the dim light, revealing a form that was neither human nor entirely shadow. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed faintly, locked onto her. Emma realized, in that moment, that the secret Daniel had kept was not just a mystery, it was alive. And it was aware of her. She took a trembling step back. I still remember that night. The darkness of the basement pressed against Emma like a living weight, heavier than ever. Her pulse raced, echoing in her ears as her eyes locked on the figure before her. It was no longer just a shadow. It had taken form, something both human-like and utterly inhuman. Its glowing eyes fixed on her. The orb at its feet pulsed like a heartbeat, each flash of light casting strange shadows across the walls. Emma could feel the energy in the room vibrating through her body, making her hand shake violently. Her mind raced. She understood now that this was not merely a secret room, not merely a hidden space, was the heart of Daniel's lifelong obsession. He had spent years keeping something alive, something powerful, something dangerous. And now, with him gone, Emma had accidentally awakened it. Her chest tightened as the realization hit her. She was alone with something she could barely comprehend. and it was aware of her presence. The whispers returned, louder this time, surrounding her. You shouldn't have come. You cannot undo this. Emma took a careful step backward. She wanted to run, but the room felt alive, watching her, pressing against her. The orb glowed brighter, and she noticed something new, faint symbols appearing on the walls. Almost like writing, almost like warnings. Her eyes widened. These were not random marks. They were protective symbols, etched by Daniel, perhaps to keep whatever this was contained. And now they pulsed with light, reacting to the awakening energy. She realized the small box she had carried all along was not just a box. It was part of the puzzle. She opened it again, examining its contents. The keys, the papers, the coins, they all seemed to resonate with the room. She could feel the energy of the orb connecting to them, guiding her somehow. Her hands shook as she picked up a key with strange engravings. Noticing how it warmed in her grasp, the figure shifted again, moving closer. Emma felt a gust of cold air, and the shadows twisted violently. She could barely breathe. But amidst the fear, a spark of determination flared. Daniel had trusted her, leaving behind these clues for her to follow. She had to understand. She had to see this through. With trembling hands, she inserted the key into a small hidden slot at the base of the pedestal. It clicked into place, and the orb flared, sending a blinding wave of light across the room. The figure recoiled slightly, letting out a low, vibrating sound that shook the stone floor. Emma shielded her eyes, heart hammering. When the light dimmed, she saw that the orb had lifted slightly from the pedestal. Hovering in the air, glowing brighter than before, a voice, deeper and more resonant than the whispers, filled the room. "Who dares awaken me?" Emma's legs trembled. She had expected fear, but this voice was more than that. It was authority, power, and something ancient. She felt the weight of the words pressing down on her, heavy and almost painful. Her mind screamed at her to run, to flee, but she couldn't. Something inside told her she needed to speak, to respond. I'm Emma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I knew Daniel. He kept you here. He trusted me too. Understand." The orb pulsed once, sharply, and the shadows shifted violently. The figure seemed to grow taller, more defined. It was watching her, evaluating her. Emma realized she was no longer just a visitor. She was a participant in something ancient. Something powerful. Something she could barely understand. Suddenly, the floor beneath her trembled. Dust and small stones fell from the ceiling. The shadows twisted and spread across the walls like living tendrils. Emma felt the energy of the orb pull at her, tugging her forward, urging her to step closer. She hesitated, then slowly moved toward it. Images flashed in her mind: Daniel in this very room, performing rituals, recording observations, consulting with the man in the photograph. She saw warnings, failed attempts, and finally, a moment of success when the orb's power was contained, controlled, yet alive. Emma's chest tightened. Daniel had not only kept this secret, he had fought to protect the world from it. And now, with his death, the containment was weakening. The figure stepped closer. And the whispers grew louder, overlapping, forming a strange chant-like rhythm. Emma felt her knees weaken. Her hands clutched the small box, the key, anything to anchor her to reality. The room seemed to expand, walls stretching, shadows reaching out. The orb pulsing faster, brighter. Emma realized the truth: the orb was a living force, ancient and sentient. It was not evil, exactly, but it was dangerous. Uncontrolled, it could destroy, consume, or corrupt. And Daniel's secret, this room, had been the only thing keeping it restrained. Now, with her here, the balance was tipping. Her mind raced. Could she contain it? Could she control it? Or had she just doomed herself by stepping into Daniel's hidden world? The figure suddenly moved toward the orb, and the air thickened with energy. A gust of wind threw Emma against the wall. She hit the floor hard, gasping for air. The whispers turned into voices, overlapping and urgent. Emma, leave danger. Death, stop. Her hands reached out, barely able to grasp the orb as it hovered, pulsing with raw power. The light blinded her, then dimmed slightly, revealing the figure fully its face. Vaguely human but impossible to comprehend, eyes glowing, shadows flowing from its form. Emma felt its gaze pierce her soul. "You were not meant to see this," the figure said, voice deep and resonant. "Daniel tried to protect you, but now the path is yours. Will you succeed or fail?" Emma swallowed hard, shaking. Her fear, her grief, her love for Daniel, and her determination all collided. She realized that she could not leave. She had to face the secret, understand it, and make a choice. The orb pulsed again. Faster, and the shadows twisted violently around her. The room seemed alive, vibrating with energy that made her head spin. Emma took a deep breath, clutching the small box tightly, and then, in a sudden motion, the orb shot upward, striking the ceiling with a blinding flash. The figure recoiled, and Emma felt herself lifted slightly off the ground, weightless in the force of the energy. Her mind screamed, her body trembled, and the shadows writhed around her like living creatures. Emma realized, with terror and awe, that Daniel's secret was no longer contained. The room, the orb, the figure, they were awake, alive, and aware of her. And then a deafening crash echoed through the basement. Something had moved. Something powerful. Something that Daniel had feared more than anything. Emma's eyes widened. She could sense it approaching. She could feel the energy growing stronger, almost unbearable. Her heart raced. She knew that what she was about to face could change everything. And in that moment, she realized one terrifying truth. She was not ready. I still remember that night. The basement trembled beneath Emma's feet, the shadows twisting violently around her. The orb hovered above the pedestal, pulsing with a light that felt alive, almost sentient. Emma's heart raced faster than ever before. Every breath she took seemed to echo in the room, swallowed up by the thick, vibrating energy. She could feel the presence moving closer, stronger, more urgent. The whispers that had haunted her since entering the basement were now louder, overlapping, urgent. Run. Leave. Too dangerous. Stop. But Emma could not run. Something deep inside compelled her to stay. Daniel had kept this secret for years. He had protected the world from this power, but now it was awake, and it had found her. She clenched the small box and the map, gripping them as tightly as she could. Trying to anchor herself in reality, the figure from the shadows stepped fully into the light. Its form was impossible to describe, part human, part shadow, with glowing eyes that seemed to see into her soul. Its movements were fluid, deliberate, and terrifying. Emma swallowed hard. She had never faced anything like this in her life. It was alive, aware, and powerful. And it was watching her dot suddenly. The orb shot forward, bouncing across the floor. Its light flared brightly, reflecting off the walls in a dazzling display that made Emma blink repeatedly. She felt the energy in the room pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. The shadows twisted violently, almost as if they were alive. Crawling along the walls and ceiling, Emma realized she had to act. She could not let the orb or the force control her. Daniel had left clues. Left the small box, the keys, and the map. They were the key to understanding, to controlling this. She opened the box, her hands trembling, and examined its contents again. One of the keys had strange engravings that seemed to glow faintly in the light of the orb. Her mind raced. Could this key unlock something? Could it help her contain the energy before it was too late? She had no choice. Summoning every ounce of courage, she stepped toward the pedestal, the orb pulsing brighter with each movement. The shadows seemed to react, writhing and reaching for her. Emma could feel her heart hammering in her chest. Fear clawed at her, but determination kept her moving forward. The orb pulsed violently, almost like a heartbeat gone wild. Emma inserted the engraved key into a small slot at the base of the pedestal, exactly as the instructions from the folded paper in the box had shown. The moment she turned it, the orb's light flared even brighter, and the figure recoiled slightly, emitting a low, vibrating growl. The room shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the shadows twisted and spun as though alive. Emma felt herself being pushed back by an invisible force. Her knees buckled, but she held on to the pedestal, gripping it with all her strength. The orb hovered above, spinning slightly, and the glowing symbols on the walls brightened, forming intricate patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the orb dot. Then, without warning, a loud crack echoed from behind her. A section of the basement wall split, revealing a hidden passage she had never noticed before. The shadows poured out from it like smoke, twisting and reaching toward the orb. Emma's heart pounded. She realized the secret Daniel had kept was no longer contained. The energy was spreading, seeking a path, seeking release. Emma glanced at the figure. It had stopped advancing and was now observing, almost calculating. Its glowing eyes never left her. She understood that it was testing her, seeing if she was worthy or capable of handling what Daniel had left behind. The orb pulsed faster, and the symbols on the walls glowed brighter, almost blinding her. Emma felt a surge of energy hit her, pushing her to the floor. She struggled to rise, hands clutching the small box, the key, and the map. The whispers had become voices now, overlapping, urgent, and almost commanding. You must stop it. You must contain it, or perish. Emma took a deep breath, summoning all her courage. She realized that Daniel had left her not only a secret, but a responsibility. She was now the one who had to manage this force, to control it, and perhaps to understand it. There was no turning back. Summoning her strength, she pressed her hands onto the orb, feeling its energy surge into her. A shock ran through her body, but she did not let go. The figure moved closer again, watching, waiting, almost silently judging her. Emma felt the orb respond to her touch, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Slowly, gradually, the violent energy began to settle. The shadows retracting slightly, but just as she thought she had some control, the hidden passage behind her creaked again. Something moved inside, heavy and deliberate. Emma turned her head slightly, and her blood ran cold. The shadows from the passage were forming shapes, moving, twisting, and advancing toward her. She realized she was not alone. The orb, the figure, the shadows, they were all connected. And something else was awakening from the hidden passage. Emma's mind raced. Could she handle this? Could she stop it before it escaped completely? The air grew colder, and the whispers turned into a chorus of urgent voices, almost pleading. Emma, run, do not touch. Flee? But she could not run. Not now. Not when Daniel had trusted her, had left her everything she needed to face this. She gripped the orb, the box, and the key tightly. The shadows were advancing, the air vibrating with raw energy. And the unknown force from the passage was approaching fast. And then, a sudden roar echoed through the basement, louder than anything Emma had ever heard. The walls shook, the orb flared with blinding light, and the figure in the shadows let out a low, resonant growl. Emma's heart stopped. She realized that whatever Daniel had been protecting, whatever had been contained for years, was now fully awake. The shadows surged forward. The orb pulsed violently. Emma's hands shook. Her breath came in short gasps. She understood one terrifying truth. She was about to face something she could not imagine. Something that could destroy her own, perhaps the world she knew. And then, the orb shot upward, spinning faster than ever, light flashing wildly, illuminating shapes she could not understand. Emma's eyes widened in terror. She knew the real challenge was only beginning. I still remember that night. The basement shook as Emma's pulse raced. The orb spun wildly above the pedestal, light flashing and shadows twisting violently across the walls. The hidden passage behind her emitted low, rumbling sounds, as if something ancient and massive was moving within. The air was thick, heavy with energy, making it almost impossible to breathe. Emma's hands trembled as she clutched the small box, the key, and the map, knowing that her life depended on them and on her courage. The figure in the shadows watched her silently, its glowing eyes tracking her every move. It no longer advanced, but Emma could feel its presence pressing on her, a constant reminder that she was being tested. The whispers that had haunted her since she discovered the room now overlapped into a chorus of urgent voices. Do not fail. Contain it, or all will be lost. Emma realized that Daniel had left her these clues not just to uncover a secret, but to survive it, to control it. She glanced at the orb again. It pulsed like a heartbeat, responding to her every movement, almost alive, almost sentient. She understood now that the orb itself was the key to controlling the chaos. But its power was enormously dangerous if she faltered. The hidden passage behind her shifted suddenly. Emma froze as a mass of shadows surged forward like liquid, slithering across the stone floor toward the orb. Shapes began to take form, humanoid, monstrous, impossible to fully see. They advanced quickly, and the air grew colder, heavier, almost suffocating. Emma's heart raced. She realized that Daniel had kept more than one secret in this room. This force, these shadows, had been contained, but now with the orb awakened, they were breaking free. She gritted her teeth, determination rising. She placed her hands firmly on the orb, feeling its energy surge into her. The light intensified, and for a brief moment, the shadows recoiled, writhing back as if afraid of the power she now controlled. Emma gasped, sweat running down her forehead. She had to hold on to maintain control, or the chaos would overwhelm her completely. The figure in the shadows shifted again. Its glowing eyes narrowed, and Emma realized it was not attacking, but observing, judging. It was almost as if it knew she was the key to containing the force. But it wanted to test her strength, her resolve, her courage. The whispers became a chant, almost hypnotic, guiding her hands, guiding her mind. Focus, control, channel, hold. Emma's vision blurred as the shadows surged once more. One of them leaped forward, a mass of dark energy that struck toward the orb. She flinched, but the orb flared brightly at her touch, repelling it. A shockwave rippled through the room, knocking Emma off her feet. She fell hard onto the stone floor, pain shooting through her arms and legs. But she forced herself upright. The hidden passage groaned, and more shadows poured forth, faster, stronger. Emma could feel the air vibrating with their energy. She realized with horror that Daniel had kept this force contained, not with strength alone, but with precision, rituals, and knowledge that she now had to understand in an instant. She opened a small box and took out the folded paper once more. The instructions Daniel had left. Her hand shook as she followed each step, placing the keys, aligning the coins, arranging them around the orb. The shadows surged again, striking like living tendrils, but the orb pulsed brighter with each correct movement. Emma felt a surge of power coursing through her, almost overwhelming, but she held on. She could not fail. Then, suddenly, a shadow lunged directly at her. It struck her shoulder, and pain flared as if fire had touched her skin. Emma stumbled back, her hands gripping the orb. Her vision spun, and she could barely breathe. But through the chaos, she heard a faint whispered Daniel's voice. Almost imperceptible. You are stronger than you think. Trust yourself. Summoning every ounce of courage, she placed the last key in position and pressed it firmly. The orb pulsed with blinding light, brighter than ever, and the shadows screamed a sound like wind through a graveyard. The light seemed to push them back, compressing them into the hidden passage. The figure in the shadows recoiled slightly, as if acknowledging her strength, her control. Emma fell to her knees, exhausted, her heart racing uncontrollably. The air slowly cleared, the cold lessened, and the shadows retreated into the passage. The orb hovered calmly above the pedestal, light steady, no longer wild. She realized she had done it. She had contained the force, at least for now. But then a cold breeze brushed past her neck. Emma froze. The hidden passage that had once held the shadows now seemed quiet, almost deceptively calm. But something deep inside her told her it was not over. The whispers returned, faint but urgent. You have delayed it. But the awakening is not finished. Be ready. Her hands trembled as she realized the truth. Daniel's secret was not simply dangerous, was alive. It had power beyond comprehension. She had survived this encounter, but she knew it was only a matter of time before it tested her again. Before the shadows returned, stronger and more relentless, Emma's gaze shifted to the orb. Its soft glow pulsed gently, almost as if it were alive and aware of her presence. She understood that she had a bond with it now, a connection that would guide her but also test her. The basement was silent for a moment except for the faint hum of the orb. She dared to breathe, but fear still gripped her heart. And then, from the far corner of the basement, a low, rumbling sound echoed different from before. Deeper, stronger, as if something immense was moving within the shadows. Emma's blood ran cold. She realized that what she had contained was only part of the secret. The true force, the heart of Daniel's hidden world, was still awakening. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Daniel had left her the secret, the knowledge, the tools, but he had not left her the answer to the greatest danger that awaited. She was alone. The shadows, the orb, the figure, they were alive, aware and watching her. Emma's hands tightened around the box. She knew one thing with certainty. The next encounter would be far worse. The force was growing, and it would not wait. And then the rumble grew louder. Something massive stirred in the hidden passage. A sound that shook the basement floor and echoed through her chest. Emma froze. Her eyes widened with terror as the realization hit her this was not over. It was only beginning. I still remember that night. The basement felt alive, almost as if the house itself were holding its breath. Emma's legs shook beneath her as she stared at the hidden passage. The rumbling sound had grown into something immense, vibrating through the stone walls, the floor, and even her bones. The shadows that had been contained by the orb were now writhing violently, pressing against the edges of the doorway, hungry, relentless. Emma realized with a shiver of terror that what Daniel had kept hidden for so long was far larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She clutched the small box, the key tightly, her fingers trembling. The orb hovered steadily above the pedestal, glowing softly, its light a beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. But Emma could feel the tension, the weight of the power around her. It wasn't just the shadows or the orbit, was something deeper, something ancient, something that had been waiting to awaken. And now it was aware of her presence. A low growl rumbled from the hidden passage. Emma's heart pounded so loudly she was sure it could be heard across the house. The shadows twisted violently, forming shapes that were impossible to comprehend. They moved with purpose, as if guided by a consciousness, seeking the orb, seeking her. She realized with a sickening clarity that she was no longer merely a witness, she was part of this secret, part of its test, part of its story. The figure in the shadows moved closer again, its glowing eyes fixed on her. Unlike before, it did not seem aggressive. Instead, it radiated judgment, as if weighing her worth, her courage, her ability to face what was coming. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The orb pulsed gently in response to her heartbeat. As if acknowledging her presence, her determination, she took a shaky step forward, her hands trembling. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered, voice barely audible. Daniel, why didn't you tell me the truth? The shadows shifted violently at her words. The rumbling from the hidden passage grew louder, deeper, as if the darkness itself were responding. Emma realized that Daniel had not only contained this force, but had fought against it, battled it, for years. The orb, the keys, the papers, all of it, had been his way to control, to protect, to survive. And now, with him gone, the responsibility had fallen to her, summoning every ounce of courage. Emma stepped closer to the orb. She placed her hands firmly on its glowing surface. Instantly, she felt a surge of energy, like electricity running through her veins, both terrifying and exhilarating. The shadows recoiled slightly, the rumbling momentarily paused, and she understood this was a connection. The orb responded to her touch, to her presence, to her resolve. Suddenly, the rumbling from the passage intensified. Emma looked toward it and froze. The shadows there were forming a shape, massive and almost solid, towering above the doorway. She could see the faint outline of what looked like a giant figure, moving slowly, deliberately, with an awareness that made her stomach churn. The whispers returned, overlapping, urgent. Do not fail. Do not falter, or all will be lost. Emma's hands shook on the orb. She realized she had only a brief moment to act. The shadows were not just seeking freedom, they were awakening something far older, far more dangerous. The figure in the shadows moved again, gliding silently across the room. Its glowing eyes never left her. Emma's chest tightened as the air vibrated with energy, thick and suffocating. Then she noticed something she hadn't before. The symbols on the walls, glowing faintly, were shifting, rearranging themselves. It was as if the room itself were alive, reacting to the awakening force, responding to her presence. Emma realized with a start that the basement, the orb, the shadows, they were all connected. She was part of a network, a balance. And every decision she made would affect the outcome. The massive shadow from the passage surged forward. Emma's heart raced. She had no choice. She pressed the keys and coins around the pedestal, following the instructions Daniel had left with desperate precision. The orb pulsed violently, sending waves of light and energy through the room. The shadows twisted, shrieked, and recoiled, struggling against the containment. Emma gritted her teeth, summoning every ounce of courage. The rumbling grew deafening. The shadows surged forward again, faster, stronger, pressing toward her. She felt herself nearly pushed to the floor, but she held firm, hands clutching the orb and the keys. A strange warmth spread through her chest, and the orb pulsed in response, stabilizing the room, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Then a voice echoed, deep and resonant. From the center of the shadows, you dare touch what Daniel could not fully contain. Emma's eyes widened. The shadow was speaking, or something within it. The energy in the room surged violently. The orb pulsed brighter, illuminating shapes she could barely comprehend in ancient forms, symbols, entities beyond her understanding. Her knees trembled, but she forced herself to stay upright. You will not control me. The shadow roared, its voice shaking the walls. Emma's pulse raced. She realized that the figure was the true heart of Daniel's secret, the force that had been contained for decades. The orb, the keys, the room, they were all Daniel's tools. But this entity had intelligence, power, and will. And now it was testing her. The shadows surged around her, twisting violently, and the orb pulsed with blinding light. Emma felt energy course through her body, overwhelming, almost too much to bear. But she clung to it, knowing she could not fail. The figure in the shadows loomed larger, moving closer, its glowing eyes fixed on her dot, and then a deafening roar echoed through the basement, louder than anything Emma had ever heard. The walls shook. The shadows twisted and writhed, forming shapes that pressed toward her from all sides. Emma's hands shook violently on the orb. She realized one terrifying truth. She was not just facing a secret. She was facing the true heart of Daniel's world, alive, aware, and far more powerful than she had ever imagined. Her breath caught. The shadows surged forward, faster, unstoppable. Emma's mind screamed. She was not ready. And then, from the center of the darkness, glowing eyes locked onto hers, intelligent, ancient, terrifying. Emma understood in that instant that the real challenge had just begun. I still remember that night. The basement seemed alive, quivering with energy that pressed against Emma from every direction. The shadows had grown massive, writhing like a storm of darkness, twisting and surging from the hidden passage. The orb hovered steadily above the pedestal, glowing with a light that felt alive, almost as if it were breathing. Emma's heart raced uncontrollably, pounding in her chest like a drum echoing through the room. She clutched the small box, the key, and the map tightly. Her hands trembled, her knees shook, but she understood that she had no choice. The entity in the shadows, the true heart of Daniel's secret, was aware of her. intelligent, and testing her in ways she could barely comprehend. The whispers had become urgent, commanding, almost pleading. Control it, channel it, focus, or all is lost. Emma took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage she had. She stepped toward the pedestal, hands trembling, and placed the keys and coins exactly as Daniel had instructed. The orb pulsed violently, sending waves of energy through the room. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing and twisting, but they did not retreat completely. The entity's glowing eyes focused on her, unblinking, judging, waiting. A sudden surge of power erupted from the orb, lifting Emma slightly off her feet. She gasped, clutching it tightly, feeling energy course through her body like electricity. Her vision blurred, but she forced herself to remain focused. She realized that the orb responded to her emotions, her determination, her courage. The stronger her resolve, the more control she had. The massive shadow from the passage surged forward again. Faster this time, its form towering and incomprehensible. Emma could see shapes within it, figures, faces, symbols moving and shifting, impossible to describe. The entity's voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the basement. You dare to wield what Daniel could not fully control. Do you know the consequences? Emma's hands shook. She realized the truth. Daniel had not simply kept a secret. He had contained a force that could destroy her, the house, maybe even more. But she could feel the orb guiding her, its energy connecting to her. She was not powerless. She had a bond with it now, a chance to survive on, maybe, just maybe. To understand, the shadows surged again, pressing against the orb in her hands. The air vibrated with energy, thick and suffocating. Emma's mind raced. She had to act or the entity would overwhelm her. She focused, imagining the energy of the orb flowing through her, around the shadows, containing them, directing them. Slowly, gradually, the pulsing of the orb responded to her thoughts. The shadows hesitated, twisting violently but not advancing. Her heart raced. She could do this. She had to do this. The whispers grew urgent, but guiding. Focus. Channel, control. You are the key. Emma pressed harder on the orb, feeling the energy surge through her body. The shadows shrieked, twisting and writhing, but the orb's light grew stronger. She could feel the entity's awareness, its intelligence, testing her limits, probing her mind. She gritted her teeth, refusing to give in to fear. Suddenly, a shock wave burst from the entity, knocking Emma to the floor. Pain shot through her arms, but she forced herself upright. She realized the entity was not merely attacking it, was communicating, testing her, gauging her strength and resolve. Emma understood that the true heart of Daniel's secret was alive, sentient, and seeking to understand her as much as she sought to control it. The orb pulsed brighter, flooding the basement with light. The shadows hissed and shrieked, pressing against the energy. But gradually, under Emma's focus, they began to slow, retracting slightly. The figure in the shadows, the one with glowing eyes, glided closer, its presence massive and overwhelming. Emma could feel its intelligence, its curiosity, almost respect. She whispered, barely audible, I want to understand. I want to protect. I don't want anyone else to be hurt, Daniel. I will finish what you started. The entity paused, the shadows halting mid-motion. For a brief, terrifying moment, the basement was silent except for the soft hum of the orb. Then the voice came again, resonant and deep. You have courage. But do you have the strength to bear it? To wield the secret fully? Emma's breath caught. She realized the truth. Controlling the orb, containing the shadows, was only the beginning. The entity was alive, ancient, and powerful. It was testing her not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Her fear, grief, love for Daniel, they all mattered. They would shape the outcome. The shadows surged one last time, larger and stronger than before. Emma braced herself, pressing her hands onto the orb with all her might. Energy coursed through her like fire, illuminating the basement with a blinding glow. The entity roared a sound that shook the floor, the walls, her very soul. The shadows twisted violently, but gradually they slowed. Compressing into the hidden passage, Emma gasped, sweat streaming down her face. Her arms trembled, but she held firm. The basement was quiet, except for the soft, steady pulse of the orb. She realized she had succeeded for now. She had faced the heart of Daniel's secret, survived, and formed a bond with the power within. But the whispers returned, faint but urgent. The awakening is not over. The final trial awaits. Be ready. Emma's eyes widened. She understood with a chilling clarity that the danger was far from gone. She had faced the entity, but the final truth, the deepest secret Daniel had hidden, was still ahead. The orb pulsed gently, as if acknowledging her resolve, and the shadows in the passage remained contained, but for how long? Her hands clenched the small box, the key, and the map. Emma's heart raced, a mixture of fear, determination, and awe. She had survived, but she knew the next encounter would be even greater, even more terrifying. And then, a soft, eerie whisper filled the basement, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. Emma, are you ready to face the truth? Her breath caught. She realized that the final secret, the one Daniel had kept hidden, even from himself, was about to reveal itself. I still remember that night. The basement was quiet now, but the air felt electric, charged with energy that seemed alive. Emma stood in front of the orb, hands trembling, heart pounding. The shadows that had tormented her for days now remained contained, pressed back into the hidden passage. But something deep inside told her that the final truth was about to reveal itself. Daniel's secret, the entity, the orbit was all connected. And she was about to understand why he had hidden it for so long. The whispers returned. Faint and melodic this time, almost guiding her. Emma, the truth awaits. Are you ready? Emma swallowed hard, feeling fear, awe, and a strange sense of purpose all at once. She nodded, her hands tightening on the small box and the key. The orb pulsed softly, and for the first time it seemed calm, as if recognizing her courage and readiness. The figure in the shadows, the one that had tested her, judged her, and observed her, lighted forward slowly, its glowing eyes fixed on hers, and for a brief, surreal moment, Emma felt not fear, but understanding. The entity was ancient, yes, powerful, yes, but it had purpose. Daniel had contained it not for harm, but to protect something: knowledge, power, maybe even the world itself. Then, the orb's light expanded, filling the basement with warmth instead of blinding brightness. Symbols on the walls glowed clearly now, forming a pattern Emma could finally recognize. She realized that Daniel had been recording, mapping, and preparing for someone. All this time he had left her a path, a test, a guide to unlock the final truth safely. The orb pulsed, and Emma felt energy flow through her like a wave, calm and powerful. She closed her eyes, focusing on the patterns, the symbols, the whispers. Slowly, visions came to her Daniel in this very basement, working tirelessly, balancing energy, writing instructions, protecting the entity. She saw the dangers he had faced, the near failures, and finally, his decision to hide it completely, waiting for someone worthy to continue. When she opened her eyes, the orb floated above the pedestal, now steady, radiant. The shadows in the passage had settled, no longer threatening, but watching, respectful. Emma realized the final truth. Daniel had not simply hidden a secret. He had been guarding knowledge and power too dangerous for the world. The entity was not evil, was ancient, intelligent, and powerful. With the right guidance, it could be contained and understood. Emma stepped closer to the orb. She touched it gently, feeling warmth spread through her fingers. A deep, resonant voice filled the basement, not threatening, but calm. You are ready. You understand the responsibility. You will protect, as Daniel did, and learn what must remain hidden. Cares filled Emma's eyes. Relief, sorrow, and pride mingled in her chest. Daniel had trusted her with everything. She had survived the shadows, faced the entity, and unlocked the heart of his secret. Now, she understood the weight of his trust and the importance of the responsibility he had left behind. The figure in the shadows stepped back. finally at peace, its glowing eyes softening. Emma realized it was not there to harm her. It had been a guide, a test, and now, with her courage proven, it could rest. The orb hovered steadily, its energy contained, but alive. Waiting for her guidance, Emma looked around the basement one last time. The symbols on the walls glowed softly, the shadows were calm, and the air no longer pressed against her chest. She felt a strange peace, even amid the lingering awe of the power she had just encountered. She understood that some secrets must remain hidden and some responsibilities must be borne alone. But she was ready. She could continue what Daniel had started, protect the knowledge, honor his legacy. A soft whisper echoed through the basement, almost like Daniel's voice. "Thank you for understanding, for being brave." Emma smiled faintly through her tears. She knew this was not the end, it was the beginning. A new chapter had started, one where she would protect the secret, respect the power, and carry the weight of Daniel's trust. Finally, she stepped back from the pedestal, her hands still trembling slightly, and whispered, "I understand, Daniel. I will not fail." The basement grew silent. The orb's glow softened, the shadows remained calm, and the air felt lighter. Emma knew that she had faced the ultimate truth, survived, and learned the responsibility that came with it. She had entered Daniel's secret room and discovered not just danger, but purpose, legacy, and the weight of trust. And as she climbed the stairs back into the light of her home, Emma understood one final thing. Some secrets are meant to remain hidden. Some truths are meant to be protected, and courage is the key to facing them. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.